I come to the floor today to bring attention to three brave Department of Homeland Security whistleblowers, Mark Jones, Mike Taylor, and Fred Wynn. These three whistleblowers came to my office to report retaliation and government misconduct. People like this, I say they ought to be considered heroes instead of like skunk at a picnic sometimes as whistleblowers are treated by our bureaucracy. Now, the retaliation that they told me about has been extensive and long enduring. In 2018, these whistleblowers made legally protected disclosures to the Office of Special Counsel and Customs and Border Protection. They legally disclosed information about delays and the failure to collect DNA from detained illegal immigrants based on DNA Fingerprint Act of 2005 and subsequent regulations. An August 21, 2019 letter from the Office of Special Counsel to the President substantiated these whistleblowers' disclosures, stating, quote, "The agency's noncompliance with the law has allowed subjects subsequently accused of violent crimes, including homicide and sexual assault, to elude detection even when detained multiple times by Customs and Border Protection or Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This is unacceptable dereliction of the agency's law enforcement mandate," end of quote. I don't know how you can get a stronger statement from a non-political division of our government about information not being properly used to stop wrongdoing. After making their protective disclosures, all three whistleblowers were retaliated against. And that gets back to my skunk at a picnic of how whistleblowers are treated by the bureaucracy. They aren't treated as the patriots they ought to be treated as. All they want to do is the government to do what the government's supposed to be doing, the law requires, and how the money should be spent. From February 2018 to the present, the Customs and Border Protection officials subjected these whistleblowers to significant changes of duty, responsibility, and working conditions. That's how you get treated if you're a whistleblower. After harsh retaliation, Fred Wynn left Customs and Border Protection Office of Intelligence to work for the United States Border Patrol doing management and program analysis work. Mr. Jones and Mr. Taylor didn't receive a performance award any year after their disclosures for the first time in all of their employment at Customs and Border Protection. They had an overall reduction in pay, have been removed from their supervisory positions, negatively impacting promotional opportunities. Once again, like a skunk at a picnic. The Office of Special Counsel also identified an intentional non-promotion for Mr. George. Additionally, Customs and Border Protection removed credentials, law enforcement authority, firearms, and law enforcement retirement coverage from Mr. Taylor and Mr. Jones. The removal of one's firearm and one's credentials is the ultimate act of personal and career retaliation against federal employees. I've been told that Mr. Jones and Mr. Taylor discovered that one senior official who was aware of their ongoing retaliation refused to commandeer their firearms and credentials without a letter from senior officials. Another person retaliated against. Customs and Border officials refused to provide the letter. The senior official who refused to participate in this retaliatory scheme then was involuntarily transferred out of his law enforcement position and stripped of premium pay in July of this year. So another person retaliated against. The Office of Special Counsel said its investigation supports a conclusion that government action against these 3 whistleblowers constituted a prohibited personnel practice. To put it plainly, the government violated federal law and retaliated against these brave whistleblowers. On August 18th this year, I sent a letter to Secretary Mayorkas and current head of the Customs and Border Protection, Troy Miller. I asked what they've done to correct the retaliatory actions and take disciplinary actions against the retaliators. Now, as you might expect, both have failed to respond. Not uncommon after telling Congress when these people come up for confirmation, we always ask them, will you answer our letters, answer our phone calls? Will you come and testify before Congress? They always say yes. In the end, I tell them, maybe to be honest, you ought to say maybe. But instead of responding to Congress, Mr. Miller's Customs and Border Protection provided a public comment to the New York Post on August the 22nd. It said this, quote, the Office of Special Counsel terminated its investigation into these claims without issuing a prohibited personnel practice report or seeking corrective action, end of quote. Now, the Office of Special Counsel told my staff multiple times that they did, in fact, seek corrective action with Customs and Border Protection. Customs and Border Protection public comment is then a lie or demonstrably false. On September the 11th of this year, I sent a follow-up letter to further address their failures to protect these whistleblowers and demand public retraction. Secretary Mayorkas and Mr. Miller failed to respond. But again, Customs and Border Protection provided a public comment to the New York Post saying about my letter, quote, this is a mischaracterization of this issue based on incomplete records, and we're unable to comment further based upon open litigation regarding these cases, something bureaucrats regularly hide behind with a quotation like that. On September the 27th of this year, I wrote another letter to Secretary Mayorkas and Mr. Miller demanding they explain their second inaccurate public comment. Customs and Border Protection, but not the Department of Homeland Security, provided a response on October 17th. That letter said, quote, the Office of Special Counsel didn't issue a final report finding a prohibited personnel practice and didn't initiate corrective action litigation before the Merit System Protection Board on the petitioner's behalf, end of quote. Did anyone catch that distinction? The public comment said, quote, corrective action, end of quote. The letter said, corrective action litigation, quote, unquote. Corrective action can take many forms and doesn't always include litigation. For example, negotiating with a parent agency to put a whistleblower in a position they were in before retaliation occurred. Customs and Border Protection attempted sleight of hand. That sleight of hand has failed. Customs and Border Protection letter makes clear its public comments are false, and they were the ones to offer mischaracterization to the public. Secretary Mayorkas has failed to take action despite my oversight efforts. Mr. Jones, Mr. Wynn, Mr. Taylor are still struggling from the many acts of retaliation that have been taken against them for speaking up to protect Americans. But this senator won't stop fighting for them and the dozens of other whistleblowers that have come to my office. There must be accountability for what's happened to these patriotic Americans. I yield the floor.